Everyone, welcome back to the How to Podcast series. I love when somebody reaches out and says, Dave, I want to start a podcast. And I'm like, oh, I get the happy dances. I'm like, oh, this is great. Another new podcaster in the world. Monica's here. She's got a great new show, Ferocious Ambition. It's not about angry people with ambition. No, it's ferocious ambition, everyone. We're all ferociously chasing ambition in life. Monica has a new podcast. I'm so thrilled. You've heard about her on the show already, and now she's here with us to talk about her journey. So excited to have her here. Monica, welcome to the How to Podcast series.
Dave, it is my absolute pleasure to be here. I feel like I'm talking to an old friend, and I'm a little starstruck because you were the one, your podcast was the one that really made me think, you know what, I can do this. So it is an absolute pleasure to be here.
I'm starstruck because it's really you, and I listen to your show, and you keep me company at work in the middle of the night when everyone's sleeping. You're the one talking in my ears, which is so cool to me. And I love connecting with great people. How did we find each other originally? Like, how did that happen?
Well, it's the easiest story to tell because I've been thinking for years that I should start a podcast. I own a business. I do a lot of keynote speaking around the country and even some global stuff. And I kept thinking, you know what, there's a lot of people out there who I talk to that have some really good perspectives on things that I want to share. And there's a lot of solo reflections that I can share. I need to do this. I can't get on TV right now. Well, maybe I can. Maybe this is the avenue to it. But the best way to start is a podcast. So I quite honestly went to Google and I searched how to start a podcast. And you were one of the first things that popped up there. Your podcast was. So I went to the podcast and whatever number it was on, I started listening and I thought, one, boy, Dave has a really calming, friendly voice. And two, I like the music that he's playing. And I just started listening. So then I would listen back a little bit and maybe about 4 episodes in, and this was, episode 200 and whatever, I said, okay, I need to start from the beginning. I need to know where, because that's just the way I am. So I literally pulled it up in your queue and I went all the way to episode 1 and just started binge listening. And I was taking a lot of notes, making a lot of mental things, doing my research and my free time that I had. And then there was this one time, I believe I was on episode, I don't know, I'm guessing here, 86 or something like that. And I said, I really have a question for Dave. And he keeps saying, reach out to me if you have a question. I'm here to help. So I did. I reached out to you and you did everything that you promised your listeners you would do. And you were there for me and encouraged me to schedule some time. And I did. And you helped me. And I ultimately recorded, launched it. And here we are now. So that is how I found you, was from Google. And then binge listening to everything Dave Campbell had to say on the How to Podcast series.
Wow. See? No, that makes me happy. That makes me very happy. Okay, good. Because that's the one thing I encourage all podcasters to do. If and when you have the chance to talk to a listener, one of your first questions, how did you find my show? Because whatever the answer is to that question, whatever you say to me, I want to do more of that, right? So if I spend 100% of my time in Facebook and nobody tells me they found me in Facebook and they find me somewhere else, I should maybe invest my time a little bit more somewhere else, right? So yeah. So that's really good. I appreciate that. That's good. That's good. Any feedback on the show to help the show get better? Like, what can we do to serve our listeners? You're a listener. Tell me, what can we do?
I am a listener. I honestly have nothing else to share because I think every user, every listener, every potential podcast host has to walk their own journey. So, the advice that you're giving and the guests that you bring on to do your co-hosting segments, that is your style of podcasting. And it just happens to resonate with me. So I can't tell you to change anything because what you're doing worked for me and it works for me. And it's still an area that I can go back to. And there's so much content right now that if the listeners have some questions about a software or how to record or how to get value out of your guest, you have all of those episodes. So it's just a matter of finding them, and that's for them to do. So I would tell you not to change anything.
Okay. And now you're a co-host on the show now yourself, which is so kind of cool, right?
It is cool. I like it.
So now someone's going to listen to you on the podcast and go, oh my gosh, A, I want to listen to Monica's podcast, and B, she tells me I can do this, so I think I can do this. So
They
you're part of the
can do
family,
this.
right?
Yes, you can do this. Do you have ferocious ambition to start a
Come on.
podcast? And you can do it.
Okay,
I love
that's
it.
that's a segue. I love that. Tell us about your show. Come on.
Yes. Well, my show is Ferocious Ambition. And as I was saying, I was alluding to it in my initial intro to you. I have this podcast. I had this desire and dream to reach out to some really cool people and talk about their journey and how they got to where they are and their success. I happen to be a successful business owner. I am a co-owner of an IT technology firm in Columbus, Ohio, and we support clients nationwide. And I've gotten to that seat, that chief client officer and co-owner, at a pretty young age, in my 40s and my mid 40s, when I was able to become co-owner. And all anybody ever wanted to talk to me about was the successes that I had, the awards that I won, the money, the accolades, the speaking engagements, all of those things. And while I'm very proud of those, and I'm very emotional sometimes when I think of the journey that has gotten me to where I am, but ultimately not a single person in all the podcasts and interviews that I had done, not a single person was talking to me about the failures I had along the way. They weren't talking to me about the struggles that it took to get where I was. And they would just say, oh, Monica, she's such a positive person. And oh, she always sees the world in rose-colored glasses. And that's true. That is very true. I do. I look at everything as an opportunity to grow and learn. But I think especially I look at all failures as an opportunity to grow and learn. I look at failures as falling forward, and what can I deduce from learning that? And that was a thing to me that I was so confused and so perplexed by why nobody wanted to talk to me about that. So that's when I said, you know what, I'm going to start this podcast, and it's going to be partially solo reflections where it's just me talking to my listener about things that I've learned along the way, or a particular struggle that I've had, whether it was in the past or right now or very recently, and how I'm kind of problem solving that, or any advice that I can give from that. But I also wanted to go talk to people who had that ferocious ambition, the ferocious ambition in their life to go forward, to accept the pitfalls that come with it, to accept, I keep calling it on my podcast, you probably hear it, when your knees get all busted up because you keep falling. So what do you do with those busted knees? How do you get up and keep moving forward? So many people fall once and they say, oh, I can't do it. I'm a failure. I can't do it. So I'm just going to stay down. Some people get up and try it again, and they fall again. And that's when they say, nope, there it is. I tried twice. I can't do it. Every once in a while, you find somebody who will fall 3 times and they stay down. I wanted to talk to the people who have fallen continuously. And even when they got to the top and they're trying the next thing, that they fall again. But what keeps that person continually getting up? What are the hits that don't take them down, but become something that they can learn from? So that's what I started Ferocious Ambition. And I'm doing some incredible interviews with some people that'll just knock your socks off. From a person who was broke as a joke when she was a missionary to becoming a mogul, growing her business so big that she had thousands of people underneath her, and then even taking that success to pivoting and changing and saying, you know what, I'm leaving all the success because it no longer is matching with what my vision for myself is. So then she goes on her own again and starts something new again. I've talked with somebody who is a celebrity manicurist who literally does celebrities' nails. She's been on TVs and television sets and music industry, and she has her own agent. And how did she get to that journey? And then I've talked to business owners. And recently I just did an interview with a fascinating man who was, again, at the top of his career, the top where all of us would look at and think, man, this is where I want to be. Multi six figures, the title that went with it, wife, 3 kids, dog, picket fence, the whole 9 yards. And his daughter died at 14 years old on a football field. And she ultimately survived. They revived her. And he said, the support that I had around me makes me want to change my entire career and go into a nonprofit sector to help support families of children who have gone through illnesses.
Wow.
So, think about that, Dave. You're talking to people who are CEOs, partners. He was so high up there in the charts you couldn't even imagine. I think I'm going to give up all this money, an entire career for it, and move into the nonprofit sector. Right. It's fascinating to me. So I could go on for hours about the amazing people that I get to interview and that I'm so honored to interview. And then I will get an amazing guy named Dave Campbell, who has 8 podcasts, and he talks a lot to a lot of different people, and he's even going to be a guest. Can you believe that?
Well, we'll get his agent to contact your people and see if we can make that happen. Right.
Have his people call my people.
We'll do that. We'll make that happen. I like it. That's great. No, your community is growing by having these guests on. Your circle of connections is growing. You're hearing great stories, but you're also having people leave the room after recording with you going, Monica's amazing. Right? And now they're going to go tell their people, and they're going to share their episode of them on your show. Your community is growing one guest at a time. I like to encourage everyone that anytime you have a guest on your show, treat them like a listener. Treat them like a listener on your show, because they will become a listener. If anything, at least to their episode, they're going to listen to their own show. So you are not just interviewing a guest, you're interviewing a listener. So keep that in your mind every time you talk to them, because they're going to tell 2 friends and so on, and your show's going to grow just by treating them as you would a listener. So. Oh,
absolutely. And I'm also, my whole background, one of my areas of background, my expertise is in marketing. So I am also thinking, boy, if these people will tell or share, if my amazing guest would share this episode on Facebook or on Instagram or TikTok or any of the socials that they have, put it in their newsletter. Some of the companies, the CEOs of the companies that I'm interviewing, they're even linking it in their digital newsletter that's going out. So it is just fascinating to watch my podcast go from 2 listens to 20 listens to 40 listens, and you just kind of see it continuing to grow. And that's pretty neat when you just see it happen organically in the grassroots effort. It's not like I'm paying thousands of dollars to bump up my podcast. I'm not there yet. Someday maybe, but not now.
You will. And that's why I did that little mini episode for you, was I wanted people to know about you. I wanted people to celebrate you. And you're I think when you set off the original email, it's kind of like, we've released it. It's kind of doing the slow release of the podcast. I'm not telling everyone. I'm like, screw that. I'm telling everyone. I want to put that out in the front of the world. I want people to fall in love with you because you're amazing. So I put it out into that little mini episode about your show, just to put it out in the world and invite the listeners to come and support you and check you out and to be there for you. Because our community is really strong. Got some really great people who listen to the show that are actively looking for other podcasters to support. So that's the beauty of doing this as well, is kind of, we're all working towards the same goal. We all want to help support each other. So that's kind of why I did that little mini episode for you as well.
Well, I love that you did that. And I'll tell you what, I don't know if I may have emailed this to you. I'm not quite sure. When I saw that mini episode, I had just turned my brain off for a minute. So I turned off the work, I turned off the podcasting, I turned off my social media, and I, was watching TV with my husband. Well, I guess I turned off a little bit because I'm always connected, but I got your email with the link to it, and I clicked it, and my husband pauses the TV and he goes, "What's that? Is that Dave guy you keep talking about? Is he talking about you?" And we just listened to the episode. And Dave, I got to be honest, it got teary-eyed at the end. I was like, he believes in me. Well, I mean, it was just super, super emotional. So thank you for bringing me out to your clients, or your not your clients, but your amazing listeners. But I will say a funny thing about that that's making me chuckle is it was your advice on one of the podcasts that said, do a soft launch. Don't throw everything at it until you get your patience with yourself. And you're telling me that you didn't even listen to your own advice. Well, I appreciate your faith and love in me. That means a lot. That means a lot.
You're thinking about doing a different segment in your show, kind of like a short little thing here and there. Talk about what you're thinking about adding to your relatively new podcast.
Yeah, so I'm ideating as Ferocious Ambition has been launched now. And right now I think I have maybe 7 episodes. And I've been releasing usually once every 2 weeks or so. And I have a couple content pieces right now that I will likely sometime this week drop 2 new episodes, one just a solo reflection from me and one as an interview. But I had people starting to come up to me who didn't fit the air quote fit. They didn't have the air quote thing that I was looking for when it comes to actually starting a company or, clawing your way up to the top. They didn't fit that thing that I was initially looking for to highlight in my full episodes dedicated to somebody in an interview for Ferocious Ambition. But Dave, what they wanted to talk about was big. And it was pieces where I said, you know what? There's so many people who want to have that kind of conversation with a friend. And maybe they're not willing to be that vulnerable to somebody. Or maybe it's an area of a topic or an industry that person's friends, their tribe, has nothing to do with. So who do they go to? So it just kind of made me think of maybe doing some sort of, I don't even know, and I keep ideating, I'm brainstorming. So I'd love to have any of your advice on but words with friends, talk with friends, something like that, where it is this episode is me talking to my girlfriend because she had a perspective that she wanted to share. She had a story about, and for example, just to give you a little content with this, I'm a competitive ballroom dancer as a hobby. I travel the country and I get to dress in glitter and spin around the dance floor doing Latin dances, and I love it. One of my friends who is a dancer, she called me up after listening to Ferocious Ambition, and she said, I love it. I want to share a story about how damaging a dance pro that I worked with for years was. And I want other potential pro-am dancers, which is what I'm called because I'm an amateur and I dance with a pro, so other pro-am dancers don't ever go down this line or this road of abuse. And these are red flags that I want people to know about. Well, she's not a business owner. She didn't, follow any of these other things. But I find that is some really good advice that could help somebody, beat whatever it is that they're looking for if it kind of falls into that. So it was, and I had many friends with different topics come up to me and say, can I come on your show and talk about this?
Yeah.
So that's where I want to capture that and I don't want to start a whole new podcast. Like I know, Dave, you'd probably say, you know what, I'm going to do podcast number 9. I don't want to do that. I want to kind of encompass it as part of Ferocious Ambition. So I'm thinking of calling it something like a Words with Friends or Fireside Chat. I don't know what it's called, but coffee talk. If you remember the old Saturday Night Live.
Yeah. So do you have? I'm leading the witness here. Do you have a Buy Me a Coffee link set up where your listeners can sponsor and support the show?
I do not.
Okay, so I know that some people I work with, they don't need the money that comes in from a donation from a listener. They're self-funded. They're fine. They don't need the money. And when I bring up the idea of having listeners donate to the show, they're like, Dave, I don't need that. I'm like, well, just a second. What if it's a way for people to engage with the show? Simple. A $5 coffee donation that comes to you from a listener that says, Monica, I love that episode with so-and-so. Here's $5. Thank you for what you do. Now, if you don't need the money, some podcasters don't, what if you pooled the money comes in for the year, and at the end of the year or twice a year or something, you take that money, sponsor someone in your local community, a single mother, buy toys for their kids or food for their kitchen cupboards, and it's all money donated through your podcast. And then come back to the show and say, everybody, because of you, this week I went to this woman's home and she's got 2 kids and this is the age. Because of you, we've taken the $2,000 that's come in. We filled her cupboards because of you. Now, as a listener of your show, Monica, the moment you tell me that, where I would have given 5 in the past, I'm giving 25 because I know what you're going to do with this money. And my money pooled with all of the other great listeners of your show together, helping someone that's bigger than all of us combined, I would do that. I would gladly donate to your show as a sign of appreciation for your hard work, your great guests, you showing up for me as a listener. I would want to give back. It's that glass of water at a job interview. Would you like, can I get you a glass of water before we sit down and do the interview? Always say yes. That's just a token of respect. Like, accept that, right? So I'm saying to you, set up a Buy Me a Coffee and just put it out there, put it in your show notes, put in your email address, social media, something. You don't have to talk about it a lot, but just put it out as a way for me to say thank you. And then in your podcast, when you want to do that segment, that's not a full episode, highlighting someone, you could have a coffee break. This coffee break was sponsored by Dave. Thanks for your Buy Me a Coffee donation at buymeacoffee.com. Dave paid for this little segment we're going to be doing. He's a listener of the show. And I'm bringing on my friend so-and-so, and she's going to talk about this. Right? You could have as a little standalone segment in your podcast, right? And you can kind of move it around wherever. You can put it near the beginning of the show, the middle, the end. You can kind of move it around to see where the best engagement is. You could also call it like you lead, dance terms, right? You as the guest, you as the person coming on, it's your turn to lead as we dance together here on the podcast. It's your turn to lead. And this lead was brought to you by this person donating to the podcast. You're raising money. I really like that. You can do whatever you want with that money. But, it gives your audience a chance to go, I sponsored the episode, and the same response you had to me shouting you out, you can now do that for your audience. And they're going to have the same response where they're going to want to say, as a non-podcaster listening to your show, I don't understand the magic of podcasting, but I know that I am on your show. Because I donated a coffee, you called me out, and I'm sharing it with everyone. I don't care. I'm telling everybody to come listen because I was mentioned on Monica's show. Right.
I love that.
You're going to build that whole engagement piece with a simple $5 donation. So there's an option.
I really like that, especially around the words with friends or my coffee break. Because some of the episodes that I'm doing with the interviews are long. Some of them are an hour and a half long, 45 minutes long, an hour long. And some of my solo reflections are on the shorter side. So it's making me think that this could be, a fun coffee break or 15 minutes of fame with Monica's friends. Something like that, sponsored to you by. But I really like that because I don't want to miss out on what these people, some friends, some colleagues, some associates, some people are just reaching out to me because they listened. And I don't want to miss out on some of what they're saying, as long as it's relevant to be able to help the mass group of listeners on a whole. And it's not some self-promoting thing. I want to help as many people as I can down as many pathways as they need help with. So I really like that. I really, really like that idea. Thank you.
Yeah. And then the SpeakPipe thing that I have as well is a great way to get listener feedback and get their voice onto the podcast, which is another whole element because now I get to hear myself on your show. And remember, I always kind of think of a non-podcaster listener. They don't understand the magic of podcasting, but they know they heard their voice on your show. It's like the radio. Yeah. Right? You just call in to win a prize so you can hear yourself on the radio.
Yeah.
I'm calling in and leaving a message and Monica played my voice on the show. It's like the coolest thing ever. Right. So that's another arm of engagement. So Buy Me a Coffee and SpeakPipe, those two things work really well to kind of bring people into the show and make them feel like they're more than just a listener. They're part of the community. So those really work well.
Do they both have links that I can simply upload into my website, ferociousambition.com or
Yeah.
monicadominic.com, and it'll link you right to it. But if
Yes.
you're on my podcast page, can I simply just,
Yep.
because I have my website, monicadominic.com, and then there's a header under there for podcast, and that brings you to the Ferocious Ambition page. And I'm able to just put in the speak pipe and buy me a coffee.
Yep. They'll give you both of them will give you a clickable link, and that's your unique link to your show.
Okay. I'll
There you
do
go.
it.
You got some
I
homework.
love it. Thank you. I do. I love homework. It's okay. Thank you.
So on the topic of SpeakPipe, I was telling you before we hit record that I'm doing the question of the month here on the podcast, where I ask podcasters who listen to the show to call in through the SpeakPipe on my website, howtopodcast.ca, and leave a message. And what I want them to do is introduce themselves, shout out their show, what is their show, what it's about, and then answer the question of the month. So I'm going to get you to do this for me. Okay, so you're going to introduce yourself, shout out your show, and then you're going to answer the question of the month, which simply is, do you, Monica, as a podcaster, do you listen to your own show? Yes or no? And if you, and why or why not? Okay, so that's kind of the question I put in front of everybody. And then I'm going to take this little section out and we're going to put it into a combined podcast episode at the end of the month. So I'm setting you up. Are you ready for this? Are you ready to answer the question?
Let me hold on one quick second.
Okay.
Let me.
Get
Okay,
yourself
yes.
ready.
I'm
so
ready.
Your name, podcast name, answer to the question of the month. Do you listen to your own show? Yes or no? Why or why not? You ready? And
Ready.
3, and 2, and 1.
Hi, Dave. This is Monica Dominic with Ferocious Ambition. I am the host of this brand new podcast that has only a few episodes. I believe I'm at 7 or 8 right now. So the answer to your question of, do I listen to my own show? Heck yes, I do. Absolutely, I listen to my own show. And the first time I started listening to my own show was just to say, did I do it? And to get the Spotify rankings up there to show that I had listeners. But then I started learning that as I listened, I could listen to my cadence, I could listen to my delivery, I could listen to my tone and my voice, and I could also listen to what I was hearing my interviews do. I started noticing the software was doing some glitches that I didn't like. I started hearing different levels of volumes of my guests who perhaps were interviewing without a speaker or without a microphone. So those were all things that I was able to learn by listening to my own podcast. So I absolutely listen to my own show. I encourage everybody else to listen to their own show because you may not be used to hearing your own voice, but you've got to get used to it because if you're not liking what you're hearing, the listeners out there won't like it as well. So my advice to any of your listeners is to always, always listen to your own podcast.
And that's how you do that. Perfect. Thank you. That's great. See, now I'm going to pull that out and we're going to use that somewhere else as well. Then we get to shout out your show multiple places. Well done. Well done. So that's the kind of things that people would love to do for you as a listener of your show. So posing a question, maybe at the end of the episode, most of your hardcore, strong listeners, community members will listen to the entirety of your podcast. They're going to stay to the end. So when you pose a question at the end, like that's going to be your most engaged listener, not always at the beginning, but usually at the end. So posing a question for them to respond to, I simply in one of my episodes said, what do you take in your coffee? How do you do your coffee? That's it. Nothing to do with podcasting. I had a message came in today from SpeakPipe. I have almond milk and I do this and I do this. I'm like, see? So that tells me that I have a listener that's listening to the entirety of my podcast and they're responding back with a fun answer to a question.
It's like
a really
that.
great way to kind of just increase that engagement. Okay.
And that connection. But it's also making me think that even if I do a pre or a post podcast to an interview where it's not an hour and a half long, it's 20 minutes about what's coming up or what we just talked about, and even engaging a question there. The most recent interview that I did when I was talking to my interview about any advice that they have or how can we help the organization and how can we help become better people? And his answer was beat the stigma. So that's making me think that I could do a post-interview reflection episode, 15, 20 minutes long, and leave that question with the audience of tell me how you're beating the stigma. What are you going to do to go out there and help make the world a better place by beating the stigma?
There you go.
I like it.
Smart. Okay, so you and I are together, and I'm sure there's other questions around podcasting, things that are coming up for you as a podcaster. Is there anything else that we can talk about that would help you on your show?
Yes, something that can help me on my show. And I'll give a little bit of background just so your listeners know. I believe you already know this, but just so the listeners know, when I was deciding on how to start my own podcast, I had listened to one of your episodes, Dave. You had a co-host, I forget her name, but she was a lovely woman who was really speaking highly of Riverside and how fun it was to be able to manipulate having the two different tracks and how it can be on your computer and then uploaded to the cloud. Then you can delete it from your computer and everything worked pretty. So I started with that and I started listening back and was noticing the pauses in between. But all of a sudden there was a pause when I was merging the voice tracks together. So that has led me now to potentially starting on Zoom to see if the call quality is any better. So one question I have to you is, do you find that when you are with Zoom and when you're uploading the tracks or downloading the tracks or uploading them and putting them in Audacity, do you have that break as well? And I guess another side note on that is there's a feature in Riverside where you could, AI generated or the bots would remove the breaks, but I found when they were removing the breaks, it was creating a popping sound. And I found that popping sound was more aggravating than the pause itself. So now I just left the pauses in there. So what advice do you have to me around what best tool to use to eliminate the pauses? And I'm not talking about the pauses that are intentional where somebody's thinking, but where there is just this lag when it wasn't a lag in our conversation.
So there's kind of two different ways we can go. If it's a video podcast, there's a set of tools for video podcasts, and there's a set of tools for audio podcasts. So
only audio.
Yeah, okay. So for audio, I love Audacity because it's free. What I do when I pull in my two tracks, so I have a track for you and I have a track for me. And when I line them up, I know where you start talking and where you stop, and I know where I come in. So I can see on the screen visually where I can see your little wave file thing on the screen stops. So I know I can bring mine close to yours and I can match them up. So I can see that I'm not talking over you, right? So what I do is I kind of line them up and I always check the beginning of the file and I go to the very end and make sure that I haven't talked over you at both ends of the audio file. That's my first starting point. That tells me I'm pretty well right on, and everything in the middle should line up because of that. But then what I do is I look at every time as the host, I see my question, and then I see on the next channel down below, I see your response. And if I see there's a gap between my question and your response, I just go and I just take that little bit of the silence and I try to bring both tracks lined up closer to me. So I'm cutting my track of silence and your spoken track. I'm bringing them a little closer and I'm just kind of tightening up each of my questions and your answers. So there's not a huge big gap. So as if I ask you a question and then there's silence for 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you start talking, I'm like, that's a big gap. So I'm going to tighten that up a little bit. So I ask my question, I remove the silence, the big gaps, and you come right in right behind me with your answer. That feels a little closer, but there's sometimes in some of these tools that are automated, which will just remove every piece of silence, which makes it feel like there's no breathing happening.
There's no break. It
sounds like you're running down a hill, trying to have a conversation as you run down a steep hill. You're just like, blah, 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 blah. You're like going really quick. And somebody did that to my podcast, me as a guest on another show. I played it for my wife. She's like, what's wrong with you? Like, why does it sound like you're so rushed? Like you have a cadence to your voice and a gallop and a thoughtful pause, all gone. Because they had gone to the extreme with the editing thing that they used and removed every little bit of silence. So I like some silence. I like some thoughtful pauses in my response from my guest, especially if we're talking about a very serious topic and they have to go somewhere in their brain to bring that memory back. I don't want to chop that out.
That's
So
right. Like
I leave
you
it
share
in.
the story of a woman you interviewed with the TBI.
Right.
And, that, so I get that. And I like that. Are you seeing on any platform, whether it's Zoom or Riverside or any other ones out there that I haven't used yet, is there these weird delays that are just added?
Again,
Okay.
it goes back to Wi-Fi connection. It goes back to recording on the internet. There's a lot of things that you can't control as the host of your show. So work within the confines of what you have is my biggest thing, I would say, to anybody starting a show. Don't get frustrated. Practice, practice, practice. If you ever get stalled on a Zoom or a Riverside or whatever you're using, just tell your guest ahead of time and go, we might get out of sync in our conversation. You might pause. I might pause. Something might happen. If that does happen, you just keep talking. And when we get back on screen together, I might be sitting here waiting as you come back. And we'll be like, we'll just pick up where we left off. So we were talking about the red shoe and you were mentioning the red shoe story and then you froze on me. So let's just go back to the red shoe story. I'll ask the question again. I'll fix it in editing.
And then you can edit it out. So one time I had spent about an hour editing out the 3-second pauses between when I finished asking and that person did. And I had edited it all out and I saved it. And then when I uploaded it, it lost it all. And it was the original recording with the pauses. So maybe I need to troubleshoot a little bit more on how to do that. So right now, I'm just begging people when you go to listen, please know that I'm doing all editing myself. So when there are pauses, just deal with them because I'll get better at it. But right now, just deal with them. And so there's another question for you then. Kind of a two-part question. One of my episodes is a fascinating interview, but my voice sounds crisp and clear and beautiful because I'm in a speaker in a soundproof room.
Yeah.
My guest was on a cell phone in an open living room, quiet living room, but for some reason, my voice, when I listened to it, when I was doing my editing on Audacity, I didn't hear it. When I published it, and I went to my website and listened to it on my radio, my voice was this booming, crystal clear voice, and hers was so much quieter. So then you turn it up and listen because it was a little pingy. It was, So then you turn it up to listen. And then when I came back on with the question, it was like, hello. It was so loud.
Yeah.
And then people had to turn it back down again. So now my question on that is, can I go into an existing, and I'm on all the platforms, Spotify, iHeart, Amazon, and Apple. Can I go back into my recording and fix the audio quality of Kimmy's, like make her voice louder and mine quieter? And can I simply replace that feed and maintain the listeners?
Yeah.
Or does it then start as a brand new episode again?
If you upload it as a new episode, as you would a future episode, it would be two versions of the same. So you do want to go in and replace the audio that you originally posted with a new version of the audio, which keeps all the listens and keeps all the things together. So replace the audio. You can go in, there's a tool called Levelator. It's just meant to fix your levels. Levelator. It's a free download that you have on your computer. Works on Windows and Mac, I believe. But it takes the audio and it levels out both you and your guest. It kind of brings them up a little bit if they're low and brings you down if you're a little high. And just kind of makes it more even. So I run all my episodes through Levelator. Every single one. That's part of my process. And the other thing would be there's another tool on Adobe Podcasts, where you can take just your guest's voice, just their track, not yours, just theirs, and you can put it in there and it'll take away some of that room noise where it feels like they're like 5 miles away from the microphone and makes them come closer like your voice. And that's a tool I'll send you a link to as well. I'll put a link in the show notes. But it's a tool that I use as well. If I have anybody that's not using a microphone, like a laptop mic or a headset mic that's a little tinny, or their phone, I run it through Adobe And then I take that track and use that as my starting point instead of doing it
Through
at the end of
Audacity.
the process. Yeah.
And then when you have the Audacity recording completely done, is that when you run it through Levelator?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. So it's not a tool that's on Audacity that we add to Audacity. It's a separate tool that I would upload that into. Okay.
Yeah,
and then I would take that.
Long time.
Do I then bring it back into Audacity to add my intro and outro?
Yes.
After it comes out of Levelator? Okay.
Yep. That's it.
And for the listeners, all of this is stuff that I learned by doing the darn thing.
That's
it. I may sound like I know what the heck I'm talking about, and I did not a few months ago.
So one thing I'd offer to you as well, Monica, set up some time. Let's get together. We can do a screen share of Audacity, and I can demonstrate how I do my stuff, answer any questions, and we can actually see me in real time mix and edit a guest interview or a solo interview, the intro, the outro. We can go through this together, just you and I, and then I'll flip the camera to you on your screen and you do the edits, and I'll show you what to click and point and just give you some more tips that might help you speed up your process as well.
I would love it because I have a feeling I've done quite a bit of YouTubing on how to, and there's so many, just for all the listeners, there are so many different YouTubers out there that walk you through a lot of that on specifically what I was using is Audacity, and then also audio where I'm housing my Audacity to then bring it over into Spotify. But I have a feeling I'm doing it on the antiquated. I was having a feeling that the way I'm zooming in and trying to cut things, I kept thinking, I bet there's a quicker way to do this. I bet there's a way that's not going to keep me up until 10 o'clock at night after a long day of work trying to do these edits. So I would love that. I would love to.
So we'll set that up in the calendar and get some time together to do that, walk you through all that, give you some little tips and tricks that'll speed up your process as well.
Yeah. And just one thing, Dave, I just want to, again, thank you so much, because listening to you even just say that, all of the listeners, because now I'm a co-host, so I'm not just a guest, so I'm saying this. As a co-host, take this guy seriously. Everybody out there listening, he's giving hours. Dave, you give hours of your time to people with no ask other than please do it with positivity and love and, pay it forward. So just so much gratitude towards you for being so willing to just help people.
So please tell me this isn't the only time you're going to come on as a co-host. You're going to come back with more questions and more comments. Please come back.
Anytime. I love it.
Promise?
Absolutely.
I'm holding you to it.
Promise.
Right.
And you're going to be a guest on my podcast too. So I'm happy to come and help. And even if you want to interview me on a side gigs, because this is my side hustle, yo.
Right.
I've got a whole other company.
Well.
I'm happy to help.
Okay. I love it. Shout out your show again, Monica, before we go.
Ferocious Ambition. And you can find me on any of the different platforms, but also an ask to the listeners or an offer to the listeners. If you have a Ferocious Ambition journey that you want to share, I would love to host you as my guest and do an interview with you, a listener out there. So when you have your own podcast that perhaps supports something that you love or a company that you have, and you've fallen down, you've busted up your knees, and you've got a story on how to get back up, I want to talk to you. I want to help share your story and your vision to the masses, because your story is valuable and you are worth it. So I just wanted to get on here real quick, Dave, and say that to all of your listeners. I want to talk to them.
Excellent. We'll have all the information, as always, in the notes for everyone to go and follow up with you. I'm encouraging everyone to go listen to your show. Give the like, the follow, the share, the review, do all the things to help each other. And as well, listen to the entirety of every episode from beginning to end, because that's a great indication to Apple and Spotify and YouTube or whatever that this is a good podcast to listen to by just listening to the end of the show. That's the best thing you can do for a podcaster. And once you have that Buy Me a Coffee and SpeakPipe in the future set up, please let me know, because I want to be your first donation. And I want to be your first voice message. That's my goal with everybody that we talk about this. I want to be the first person to send that email through to you, and I want you to experience that, okay? So that's my ask of you.
You shall receive it. You will be the first. Yes, sir.
Awesome. Everyone, all the information, as always, in the show notes, Monica. Thank you for listening to the show, and I'm so glad to have you as part of our little community here, and we're cheering you on with great anticipation for good things ahead.
I appreciate you so much, everything you do.
Hey, thanks for being here at the end of the podcast. This is just for you because you're still here. Thank you for your support for the podcast. Thank you for listening to the show, sharing it with other podcasters. Maybe somebody you know is thinking about starting a show. I would love for you to say, hey, wait. You should go check out the How to Podcast series. It's got everything you need. And Dave as well is included. You get one free Dave with the How to Podcast series. I'm included with it. So kind of a bundle thing you get. To that point, mentioning it in the podcast, definitely want to remind you here at the end, there's a link in the show notes. Starting it this summer, I'm working through this. It's a way for us, you and I, to have a conversation around podcasting. I want to help you. And I've been doing this for people who listen to the show now for almost 3 years. And I just haven't been promoting it as a thing. So I'm now promoting it as a thing. I want to spend time with you. I kind of would love to hear your voice. We're going to jump on Zoom together. We're going to talk about your podcast. You get time one-on-one with me, 30 minutes in my calendar, completely free, no strings attached. You don't have to buy a blender or a vacuum or none of that stuff. No, just us. I just like to help you. And whether you're thinking about starting a show or you have a show, you want to grow your show, whatever it is, I'd love to meet you, talk about your struggles, your questions, work together. And I am eventually developing this into more of a coaching program for podcasters. But I'm starting with my best friends first, for free. So if you're interested, you listen to the show, and I appreciate you. Link in the show notes. Let's get together and talk podcasting, okay? You and me. Let's talk. Let's talk soon. See you. Thanks.